Hi, this is Ron Jones. I'm here to talk to you about a really fascinating part of brain science that I've learned quite a few years ago. Actually, a couple things that I've learned along the way. And while the human body and how we move and how all that information is processed in the brain is extremely complicated, let's break it down into what we like to call at the Lean-Berets a bumper sticker version, or grade 2. And by all means, that's not to disrespect anybody, it's so we understand it ourselves here at base camp. So something I learned a long time ago was a principle called threat modulation. So if you think like a caveman or cavewoman, this is going to be really primal. It's a survival way of thinking about the brain and how it processes information. So if you think about how information comes in the brain, it's going to go in one of two silos. Okay, so this is our sensory input, and sensory input is what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what and even what we feel. So anything that's a sense is information, right? So that's sensory input, and it's either going to be threatening to our survival or not. And the brain is very, very primal this way. So what you see, who you talk to, how people approach you, they're threatening or not. So if they're not threatening, it goes in this silo. If they are threatening, it goes over here. Now, there are many things that are unpleasant, or what we'll call noxious. They're not necessarily threatening to my survival in terms of me dying or being killed or harmed, but I just don't like them. They're unpleasant. For some people, that can be the color of shirt you wear, or a certain type of music, or a certain way you speak, or a certain type of car. So there are a lot of things that are noxious. Smells. Strong perfume on women I find very noxious. So those types of things, they won't kill me, but it's unpleasant. But this is how the brain processes things. So when I learned threat modulation, it really changed my delivery, especially in terms of teaching movement and physical education, because I realized a lot of what I was doing previous to learning this was more threatening to people. So at the Lean-Berets, our real goal is we want everybody to play. So what do we need to do in order to deliver the information and the proper content to get people out of a state of threat so they'll play better? Because when you're in a state of threat, basically that's not a good place to learn. The postures manifested in threat would be flexion, adduction, think fetal position. So we're basically getting ready to be attacked or counterattack and do things like that when we come out of the flexion, fight or flight. So anyway, this is extremely important to know, especially in a corporate environment, because when people are in threat, they behave completely differently as when they're out of threat. And a better place to learn and a better place to move in terms of exercise quality is when people are non-threatened. So a lot of programming today puts people in a state of threat. People are screaming and yelling and pushing people beyond what they can really control. And so, posturally, we know they're not going to move as well over here. And so there are a lot of issues with that we won't get into in total today. But let's move out of threat modulation. This is a real simplistic way to look at this. It's very helpful to know. It's either threatening or not. And I hope the presentation today is not threatening, right? And not noxious. Now, if we take that a step further, let's get into cross-body patterns, because I've had a lot of questions about why do you use so many cross-body patterns? Why are you always going from right to left, left to right? And I've talked about how that helps people relax and feel better. So here's a little breakdown of how that works. We're going to take it another step further beyond threat modulation. So think of an X. A cross-body pattern is an X, right? I'm moving from my right to my left foot, or maybe from my left hand to my right foot. So X patterns are important, cross body. What happens when you move from left to right, right to left, is you start moving back and forth across the midline of your brain. And this makes your brain integrate totally. So we're going to go back to threat modulation just for a second and try to keep this as simple as possible. Remember when people were threatened, right? They're either non-threatened or they are threatened. When you're threatened, you're thinking with your brainstem, your reptile brain. So as a reptile, they don't have rational thought, right? A lizard is food or it's looking for food, right? This is how it is. So When you're in a reptile brain state, this brainstem, these things are hardwired into us for survival purposes. We're quick and reactive, and we're going to fight or flight. And that's great, because if someone burst into the shooting area here with a knife, I need to be quick and reactive in order to get away or fight my way out of that situation. However, in a corporate situation or a school situation or just hanging out with family, you don't want to be using your reptile brain all the time, because it's not a good way to have a conversation and rationally deal with things and use your whole brain. So here's the real trick. When let's say a person is in the reptile brain, they're quick and reactive, they're threatened, there's some bad things going on they don't feel good about. When you start using a real simple cross-body pattern, it forces your brain to get out of just that exclusive brainstem function and makes you start using the left to right hemispheres of your brain, both sides. This is the midline. You're crossing those signals back and forth. If you remember from basic anatomy, if you've had it, you know, my right hand is controlled by the left side of my brain, and my left hand is controlled by the right side of my brain. So I've got all these cross-body relationships going on when I use certain types of movement, right? The movement is the key. So something as simple as just taking my right hand to my left knee, left to right, back and forth. I know this sounds weird, like it won't work, but that has a calming effect with people, because it's making them get out of their brainstem, and it's enabling them to have full brain integration, using that whole brain, left and right sides, crossing that brain bridge, if you will. That's one way to describe it. Well, I'm not going to get into technical terms here. We'll keep it real simple. So something else to think about is that the restorative patterns out of history, and you know I like to study history a lot with the history of PE and classical physical education, are circular. So we have circles, spirals, and figure eights. Okay, so restorative patterns: circles, spirals, figure eights. Circles, spirals, figure eights. So if you think about your programming and you put circles, spirals, figure eights, a lot of cross-body patterns, it's much healthier for your brain, and as long as you don't overdo it, it's going to have a calming effect, and it's going to make you feel different. So much of what I do now involves circles, spirals, figure eights, cross-body patterns, not just because I want to get more fit and improve range of motion, but I know how healthy it is for my brain. It also reboots or resets my brain, and I can get out of a state of threat here and back up into, okay, I feel better, I'm using more of my whole brain to think. That's what I need to do in order to make a better decision. And believe me, no one is perfect at this. It's impossible never to be threatening to people. And let's just be non-politically correct here. No one can please everybody all the time. I might have a black shirt on, and some people don't like black and they find that noxious. But ideally, you know, when we're presenting information or maybe doing a work project, things of that nature, teaching, we do our best to at least be aware of this and be non-threatening. So all these Indian clubs here, you know, all these tools, you know, are out of history, right? And they use cross-body patterns. So I'm taking this club and I'm doing a circle and kind of a spiral pattern. I'm taking it from my right over to my left and then back, and I've got one on the other hand. I'm going back and forth. And so all this is happening with a simple historic tool like an Indian club. Simple because they can actually get quite complex in terms of patterning. So I hope that helps you, okay? If you know this, it can make a huge difference in your workplace and in just overall setting socially. Threatening or not, how you present yourself, you know, what you're doing, what you're wearing, and then if somebody's in a reptile brain, can you do some cross-body pattern work to get them out? I'd like to make a recommendation. If you want to learn more about this, I've been studying this material for years. This is absolutely the best book out there, in my personal opinion. Educate Your Brain by Kathy Brown. She's a master brain gym teacher. She also taught in the public school system for nearly 20 years. She's consulted with school districts, athletes, athletic teams, learning disabled students. This is a wonderful book to explain all this a little bit deeper, but in a real practical way. I believe the book is written directly towards parents and also teachers that want to implement some of this in the classroom. Brain Gym has been using things like this for decades in the classroom to help get students with learning disabilities back on task, calm down, manage discipline problems. This is nothing new. Historically, circle, spirals, figure eights, right? We know that. This goes way back in the history of martial arts. But in terms of the modern era, at least the past few decades, Brain Gym is gold. I highly recommend you check into it. Your first stop, I think, should be Educate Your Brain with Kathy Brown. I know it will help you. I have no doubts that you'll enjoy the read. So thank you, and I hope this gives you a little insight into a new way of thinking and also training your physical body.